everybody, and welcome to another Army review. Very excited to be sitting down and doing one of these again. If you weren't around for the last one, as you may or may not have heard, as it stands right now, there are not a lot of events happening, which is unfortunate. I know I miss them. But a lot of people did a lot of hard work getting their models ready for these events that are now unfortunately, not happening because of the global situation. And so last time for Adepticon, I did an army review of some folks that had that were going to submit their armies. And so the TO, Brendan Melnick of Brew City Brawl, reached out and asked if I would do one for his, because Brew City is a great tournament. It's meant to be something where people can unwind, put some crazy stuff on the table, and really have some fun. And unfortunately, because of the current situation, it got called off this year. Although obviously it is hoping to be back in 2021. If you're interested in the event, you can. I'll link Brendan's Twitter down below. You can follow there, and you can find everything related to the event on that. But what we're going to do today is go through some of these folks' armies. As this is the second time I'm doing it, I actually thought ahead and asked people to submit like certain shots and certain formats, so we're much better aligned this time. I wasn't expecting to do another one of these so soon, but hey, the world just works out. So we'll see how long this continues and how long we can't have events. I guess this is your consolation prize for not having events. I do a lot of these. As I said before on the last one, this is something that, regardless of how the world goes in the future as we return to normal, whatever that looks like on the other side of this, I do want to keep doing this because I know there's a lot of people out there who are working hard and they paint up their whole armies, but then they might not ever actually go to an event. And so, they don't have a chance to share that out with people. And this seems like a really cool way to do that. So with that being said, and the introduction, what we're going to do is I'm going to look over all these armies and review them as though I was paint judging the event. So I'll share them, my thoughts, kind of how I would evaluate them, what I like, what I see as opportunities for growth and improvement, that sort of thing. Okay? So with that preamble out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? All right. So we start off here with Chris Grafton, and Chris has an IDK force that's obviously extremely heavily converted, which I dig. So we can see the full collected force here, and as we go forward in the images, we'll see a few more close-ups. So this, I believe, is his Tidecaster in the center, and then his two characters, like his soul scryers or whatnot that they are. Obviously, I'm not sure what the original mini is that the Tidecaster is. Obviously, it's a very small guy on a big base. And then the Tidecasters are Bretonnian sorceresses from that time period, or damsels, I guess would be the appropriate term. Are there prizes for the winner? No, sadly, there are not. Kudos. There are kudos to be had. All the kudos you want. There will be lots of kudos, and I will tell you which one I would sort of pick overall if I was doing it. So certainly I will be giving out like a Vince's pick, which you can redeem for all the Vince bucks you want. Vince bucks are not redeemable for any other product, service, or anything anywhere in the world in any way, shape, or form, are non-transferable into any other currency and may not be utilized for anything of actual value. But nonetheless, you get some. So there you go. So very cool characters there. We can see the Namarti conversions. These all very much remind me of the like Tillian border states, the kind of border princess type of thing. There was a Dogs of War unit that this reminds me of as well. I think it was like Al Mukhtar's Desert Dogs. It kind of has that feeling to it, right? And then but these are obviously really impressive. Fun conversions of all these different elements. They look, obviously building on the existing base of these guys. Here's the Eel Riders. So again, nice conversions there, like the variation on the eels for coloration. So looking at these and talking about sort of where do we see opportunities, what do we like? Okay. Well, I always like. I'm not sure. Jason had said in the comments, by the way, not even a high five. I can give you a virtual high five. I'm not sure we want to be high fiving in person anymore. Maybe talk to me in like maybe 12 to 18 months, and then we'll see what we can do for high fives. But you can have a virtual high five or a distance five. So looking at this army, the things I really like are obviously the conversions and the theme. It looks really nice. It has a good narrative and story to it overall. There's a couple interesting issues that I want to sort of draw people's attention to, and some of them might surprise you. So let's we'll jump into the individual shots. So I want to start on the characters because that's actually, I feel like, where we've got sort of the most opportunity. The first thing I'll say is Chris's army is very well painted. I like the things I really love are there's a lot of tonal variation in a lot of the pieces. The paint is applied very cleanly and effectively. The things like stone have a lot of color to them. Like you look at those, there's a lot of different browns and greens and stuff like that. And this is something I bang on about all the time, is that if you're going to paint stone, please don't make it just gray. That is never interesting in any way. So let's talk about the main character. This is actually where I think the weakest spot of the army is. Like, I understand what Chris was going for in the Tidecaster, but I honestly, and I'm not sure this would super negatively impact it, but it's something that would be uncomfortable to me. There's two things about the main character that bother me. The first is, certainly in this event is very friendly to these kinds of proxies, so I'm not judging it based on any kind of gaming criteria. But in general, when you have a small fig that's on a huge base like this, it just feels like you're missing something. I understand that we have to use the big base because that's what the big wave riders are on. And that's very nice. Anthony said he'll send a very nice printed piece of terrain to the best overall and the runner-up. Okay, I'm down with that. That's a wonderful. That is a wonderful, wonderful offer. So there you go. We'll make that happen. And so you're the Eidolon. Thank you very much. I couldn't remember the name of the thing. I was gonna go with Wave Rider because that sounds more fun. But my issue with it is, if you're gonna do a singular guy on a big base, if he's gonna shrink down that small to where you want a normal human. Clearly, Chris's instinct here was, this is sort of the leader of the army. This is kind of the person who's put together this sort of Tillian Border Prince type force. And, he wanted it to be a human, not a giant magical being riding on a cloak made of a sea wave. So I'm cool with that, sort of thematically. My issue with it is there's so much of the base that's not doing anything. I would be okay with this if you went the direction of a Catacross or the St. Catherine thing out of 40K, where it's almost more of a singular model as a diorama, right? So if we had some other, and this guy is the leader of the army, so why not have, if these are sort of a mercenary force, or if he's going for something like that, maybe we have a paymaster on there as well. Maybe we have somebody who's taking notes about how the different units are performing. Think like Catacross, right? And I think you could have other figures in there. If that's not the idea, have other dioramic aspects, right? Like other figures, other things, other points of visual interest. I like the addition of the little pond right here, but it is still, in the end, a tiny figure that could easily fit on, frankly, like a 25 mil base, sitting on a 100 mil base. That's tough. Secondly, always be careful on including basically like non-painted elements in an otherwise painted thing. This big thing that is, somebody in the comments said, looks kind of like Twizzlers, which I agree. It does kind of look like Twizzlers. Cool. I get sort of what you're going for here with this kind of portal arch structure, but I would do more with that visually. it's detracting, not adding, to have this big singularly colored thing here that's just kind of mildly glossy. The other thing I would say is that be careful with these girls are right on the edge. Be careful when you put people up on bases. I know I love tall bases. I'm well known for it and I love them. But there's a very simple rule. The base cannot be taller than the fig. Okay? And if you look at my stuff, despite all me being often on big bases, I never break that rule. Okay? Even my Archaon, who's on a house, he is still taller than the house. Right? So with single figs like this, you want to be careful. You're not there, but this girl is pretty close. So you want to be careful with stuff like that. Now, these are honestly, the main troops are honestly some of my favorite parts of the army. I think the highlighting here is exactly where I'd want to see it. I think the paint application stuff is really clean. The conversions are really nice. These are great, right? These are absolutely fantastic. Dig them to just, I absolutely dig this stuff. So this is great. The eels, also very nice. I love that we didn't go for a singular color for all the eels. I have no problem with that. People focus too much on consistency, I think, to the detriment of art. And having the eels be slightly different colored here in different packs, different types of, colors and groups of eels. That's a great choice. Makes the unit more visually compelling. I love the patterns and things like that we've put on the eels here. So I think that's really nice. I think where we've got some opportunity is throughout the army, some of the steel and metals look a little flat. So adding some more color and variation to those, I think, would be good. Same with a little bit of the bone. Some of the bone elements, like his little conch horn, and some of the white elements, like that they have the sort of turbans that are on their head or whatever, are a little bit flatter than I would like. The coloration on the other pieces is stronger than it is on the whites, which makes sense. It's a very difficult color to highlight, so I understand. I'm just saying I think that's probably the weaker element of the army. The only other element I would point out is that the basing is kind of boring. So when we look at everything, it's not bad. I like all of the rocks and the sand, and we've got some tufts. It's fine. It's not super selling me on anything, and I'd love it, especially on the eels is where I notice it more than on the foot troops. The foot troops, it actually doesn't bother me as much because they're taking up more of the base. The eels being so big and off of the base gives you a lot more room to play with, and I would have loved to see a little bit more stuff going on there. Like you did the little eddy pool up here, like little pools, or could be stagnant water, could be running water, could be skulls, could be discarded weapons, could be any of 100 things. You pick the thing that fits your narrative, right? But I think that that's one of the things I would like to see. But overall, this is a really great army. So, well done, Chris. Okay. Next up, we've got Chuck Moore. So let's bring Chuck's army up. There we go. Okay, so Chuck bringing out his daughters. And, of course, Chuck is famous for his daughter's army. This was a big love of him, led by Teyrathi, obviously. And, Chuck is famous for he's approaching, I think, 250 witch elves now. So that's just an outrageous number. Most of those are the old metal witch elves because he's a crazy person. But it's a good example of, if you just keep working on something little by little, you can get a whole bunch of stuff done. And so let's go ahead and look. We've got 2 more shots of the army here. Obviously, one of the things that's great about Chuck's army is he didn't use all of these same components. So that is to say, all of his cauldrons don't just have the statue of Cain on the top. For example, he has different statuary that's been converted. Like over here we have old Tyrion, who was of course the avatar of Cain, and so is the statue of Cain here. And you can see how we have different elements. I'm sorry, that one's Tyrion. Which one's that one? That's old. I'm not sure which one that is. Tyrion's over on this side. Sorry. There he is. And then as well, of course, the blood racks and the integration of the Yanari and so much like that. So really great conversions all around. Lots of fun stuff. I think, Chuck, my main push for you looking at your army would be just a few things. And that would be especially on your centerpiece models to give a little more attention to things like tonal variation. So specifically with Marathi is where I notice it the most. She has lots of areas that are quite flat in their color, especially like her skin, the front plates of her belly, that kind of stuff. And those elements just feel like they could use a little more highlighting, a couple more layers, something like that. And Chuck, much as what I said to you with your Slaneshi force I reviewed last time for Adepticon, I would also point out that I would love to see you do more with basing. I do feel, Chuck, that looking over your armies, your biggest area for opportunity as you go forward is to put a little more love and care into your bases. It's something I definitely take note of when I'm judging an army, because a great paint job on a boring base, it detracts from the overall work, right? So that's one of the things I would say. Beyond that, I think, yes, focus, Chuck, on some more layering, like things like your reds, adding a little bit more of that with your skin tones, adding some deeper shading, reds and purples and stuff like that. I think will really bring your army up a notch. But overall, this is a gorgeous force. Chuck has just an unbelievably beautiful, massive, truly massive army of Daughters of Cain, and it's great to be able to share it here. So I do hope that's helpful, Chuck, and I look forward to seeing these girls again on the table someday. I've only gotten a chance to play Chuck, I think, once in all of our time, so as friends. But he's a great guy, and obviously he runs Nova, which we're all hoping will still... The Nova tournament, which we're all hoping will somehow happen. We'll see what that happens there. Okay, next up we have Dave Nordstrom. And Dave is bringing us a Nurgly force, as you can see here immediately. We start out with the big Temurkin. I don't know how you say this guy's name. It's Temurkin's Horde. Whatever. And so we've got him on top of his weird beast here. We've got some nice Blight Kings with some integration of the Stormcast elements. It is funny, I've seen a couple people do this. I'll pause here. Razor Tree asked, does a great basing scheme enhance a mediocre paint job? Yes, 1,000%. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. It does a lot. You can sell a mediocre paint job with an amazing base, and it will land much, much harder. Yes, absolutely. To the point where it will make the paint job seem stronger. Okay. So, yep. It makes a difference. Now, obviously, your perfect case scenario is both are good, right? And ultimately, if you ask me which one's going to win, well, a better painted miniature with an average base is going to come out over a mediocre painted miniature with an amazing base. Chances are it'll fall toward the better painted miniature. That is what we're on about here. But a great base will absolutely enhance even a mediocre paint job. Okay? So there you go. All right. So to continue on then with Dave here. So he's given us some really nice shots of Temurkin and of his. I think this is his the Nurgle character that bubbles out a 5-up save, whose name I can never remember. But yeah, it's this guy. His effective, the Nurgle Lord on Demonic Mount. Harbinger of Decay. We got there. We got there. I got that before anybody said it in the chat. I just want to say that. Okay. So overall, this is really cool. I like the big converted sort of Nurgle-ish portal. I think that's really neat. And I dig this army. One of the fun things about Nurgle is that you can be gross. You can use a lot of textures. You can use things you wouldn't normally get to use a lot, which is very cool. You can have a really good time with all sorts of different effects. Blood, gore, goop, poison, disease, pustules, right? This is the fun of Nurgle. And so I like seeing all of that brought out here in a cool way. I want to actually jump over to the Blight Kings, because that's going to kind of be a good element for me to talk about where I see your areas of opportunity here, Dave. So the number one thing I would say for you is, much like I said previously, and this is a pretty common theme, sell me a little more on the bases, like some static grass and some mud. I mean, this is a Nurgle force. Are they turning the ground to disease where they walk? One would assume so, right? That they bring the pestilence and the disease with them. So give me some representations of that. Give me, even if it's just puddles of mud, not Puddle of Mud, the early 2000s uh, bad metal band or rock band or whatever you feel that they should fit into. I just not good. But actual like puddles, or especially, just get yourself some Nurgle's Rot, make some little puddles. That's a good trick. Have some skulls, have some stuff, have like little elements that tell me they are the harbingers of this kind of Grandfather Nurgle's blessing, right? Now, on the elements themselves, I like the little conversions. They're used sparingly but interestingly, so I dig that. One of the things, though, I would say is I would love to see a little bit more variation and wear and tear. Nurgle people don't take good care of their stuff. It's your chance to really get out the rust and the crust and go to town. And when I see all of the different brass and copper and gold effects, and I don't see any oxidation or weathering, when I see the steel and I don't see really enough rust, like they've got some brown tones in them, but I'd love to see some really, these weapons are pitted as all get out, right? I mean, rust has eaten away at these. And so I would love to see, that really brought to the fore through some extreme weathering and stuff like that. That helps really sell a Nurgle force when you see that kind of stuff. The other thing I would say is on things like the skin, give me a little more color. Tonal variation is a challenge all throughout here, but the places where it jumps out to me the most is the skin, which I'd love to see more green tones, purple tones, red tones. That's especially good for bloated flesh. But I'd also love to see the horns. Like you have various bone elements in here. Almost all these guys have some kind of horns. Very common to have horns in Nurgle. And I would love to see those have much more in the way of transitions on them. I think that would sell the whole effect a lot stronger. Okay. So, but very cool force. And I dig the heck out of actually seeing Tamerkin on the table. Tamerkin, however you say his name. This guy. That guy. All right. I hope you don't ever come to this channel for pronunciation guides, because that is not going to end well. Okay, so next up we have George. Oh boy. I'm going to say Tasek. Ptaceek. I'm going to call that Tasek. I assume the P is silent, but who knows? He brings us a Fire Slayer force. So you can see we still got a few figs that he was hoping to finish up for the event, but I suspect they didn't get fully painted because he wasn't pushing himself, knowing that the event was canceled. We've got a couple people who have a few figs they didn't get painted. That's okay. We're just going to kind of ignore those in our judging and assume that for the purposes of the event, they would have went into hurry up offense mode and got them painted when they knew the event wasn't happening because of our situation. They probably lost a little bit of their hobby mojo, and that's all right. We're not going to hold that against anybody. So this is a great force. Very nice lava bases, very striking, nice bright orange colors. I especially like your treatment of the terrain piece in the back. I think that gold looks really nice. I think the fires going up into this nice dark black smoke looks really good. So I think you sold that effect well. I like the lava bases on the foot troops a little better than I like the lava bases on the on your Magmadroths. And that's only because the Magmadroths feel a little bit like they're just standing on cork in the middle of the lava. Like we didn't do enough to kind of disguise that that's cork by having some lava up on top, by doing more pitting and texturing over it. You don't ever want to just sort of see cork on your bases. That's a thing I see a lot, and I really wish it would stop. And I get it. I have older armies where I'm just as guilty of it. So, we all do it at some point, but we can go beyond. So I'd love to see a little more texturing variation in there. Make the lava flowing up onto there in some degrees, have it more connected, have places where it's bubbling. That kind of stuff I think is a good step there. I will say I do like very much that you kept your two Magmadroths very distinctly colored. You didn't do them the same. So I do like that, like one being more looking like cooled lava and one being more hot fire. So I actually think that's a really nice touch. Again, don't overvalue consistency. Having some different visual markers like that in your army is actually something that I evaluate quite strongly when I'm looking at an army, because it makes it more visually compelling from farther away. If all I can see is a big suite of one color, it's less interesting than seeing, oh, if I see some different colors, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go check that out, right? And then it becomes about execution. I think also on the Mohawks, I'd love to see a little deeper color down at the base of the Mohawks. They're very nice. They're very orange. I'd love to see the base kind of the Mohawk here go a little bit deeper and darker to really push that contrast on the Mohawks themselves. But overall, I think this is a very cool force. I certainly dig it, and I think that this is pretty great. So well done, George. Okay, next up we've got Jack Coward, who brings us another Nurgle force. We've got and his kitchen as well. And set him up on. It's a nice countertop you got there. I like that. It's a nice island. I like a good island in a kitchen. Good backsplash too. At any rate, let's look at the army itself. We've got a little bit of overexposure, but we will go through it nonetheless. We've got some different pictures here. So there we had. Let's go back and look at Glotkin, the brothers Glot, and over here we have Rotigus, obviously. And then here we've got a little bit more of the combined force with his Blight Kings and some of the other elements, such as the Nurgle trees in the background. So, a couple different elements I would say in looking at these. So first off, I do like how much you're going for it on the bases. I dig that. A lot of different texture and elements and stuff you're using, so that's cool. Do be careful when you use a lot of elements like that you shouldn't ever put unpainted stuff on your base. I include like tufts and everything like that. You should always paint everything, even if it just means you put a wash over it and maybe a little dry brush. And that's what I would recommend here. With a lot of this kind of muck foliage that you've used, it's cool, but it's too monotone. It doesn't feel like it's in scale because it's all sort of one color. So just getting some washes, get out some Agrax or some Athonian Camo Shade or something like that, and just kind of slop some of that on there, and then maybe do a light dry brush with a soft brush over top a little bit with some, like an ivory, and boom, you're done, and you've done a huge amount of work there, okay? The other thing I would warn you against is be careful with shininess. Glotkin's real glossy, and that's because we used, I suspect, like washes all over him, and I can see that some of these guys have that same glossiness. You do want to avoid that, especially on something that's like natural flesh. You don't want Glotkin to be shiny. It's going to sort of distract from what you're aiming at. The other thing I notice is on the centerpieces. So let me go over to... let's go over to Rotigus. Oops. Yeah, we'll go over to Rotigus. Here we go. Okay. So both he and Glotkin suffer from sort of the same challenge. In general, when I'm looking at an army, I am much more forgiving on the rank and file troops, especially if it's a thing you've got to have a large number of. Like, I look for paint cleanliness, I want to see tonal variation, I want to see all that. But if it's not up to an 11, I understand when it comes to, 30 plague bearers or 100 clan rats or something like that, right? There's only so much time we all have in the day. Let's be reasonable here. But when it comes to the centerpiece models, that's the place where I'm going to look and really want to see that you put the love and care in there. So you should always be spending more time with your centerpiece models than you are with your rank and file troops. And here I see there's a lot of opportunity in the skin for, again, more tonal variation, more stuff where we're working in greens and deeper greens and purples and more red tones. There's a lot of bruising and pits and boils and stuff on the skin, and those aren't really picked out. So just paying attention to that detail and really using everything that's given to you on the model would be my best piece of advice for you. So, but thanks for sharing, Jack. Very cool. Okay, next up we've got James Nelson. James is bringing us, here we'll scoop out, there we go. James has a lot of crazy stuff going on. I'm going to be honest, and I assume that he was going for some kind of cities force or something like that is probably what it is. I don't know. I wasn't told what the armies are, so I'm going to assume a cities force. Because it's guys riding cold ones, and I see some Caradron overlords and other stuff like that. So it kind of feels like a cities force to me. So obviously we've got a lot of unpainted elements in there, but there's a lot of conversions. So what I'll just kind of talk about, James, is when you're going for a highly converted force, because I suspect the things in the back right are his gyro bombers, is what I'm thinking. I think. Okay, good. I was right. Tempest Eye. Yes, nailed it. Okay, good. At any rate, when you're going for conversions like this, it's great to have a theme, and it's cool to do all of that. When you're using a lot of different figures like you are here, okay, where we've got some organic stuff, and then we've got the KO ships, and we've got the biplanes as our gyro bombers and all of that kind of thing. When you're working on these different elements all together, try to find some kind of visual cue that's really tying everything together, right? Like, that is to say, you have some pistoliers, and you've got some probably what are demigryphs and gyrocopters and shadow warriors and all this stuff, and that's cool. I like all of these elements in an army, but they need to have some kind of visual signifier that they all belong together. And that's what's kind of lacking here, other than, yes, there's kind of some red that's scattered about, but then even then I don't see it necessarily on all of them. Like, some of these people are just in yellow, right? And so ostensibly what we would want to see is those visual elements that kind of bring everything together, okay? Where you've got some kind of unifying key that tells me this all belongs in a singular force. I talked before about how you can be, people try to be too samey. This is the opposite end of that, right? There is a point where it will snap. And I've got to have some kind of cues, even if it was just they all shared an insignia. Everybody had some similar element. You had similar colors in similar places. If all the boats and the cloaks all had the same like symbol on them or something like that. Those are the elements you can do. So you can be very, you can be quite myriad the tools you would use here, right? So that's what I'll say, James. As per previous comments, see everything I said so far about basing. Once again, certainly another option. And yes, as somebody just in the comments, something like banners or sigils. Yes, exactly. Some kind of element that tells me this all belongs together. And you can use one color kind of across the force. If red is what you're going for here, then make sure everybody has some red on them, on like their clothing or the parts that they would clearly choose. Don't just make the beasts red, because the beast didn't have a choice what color they wanted to be, right? They were just born red, apparently, because they're cold ones. But like, somebody painted that gyro bomber, and somebody chose to sew that cloak out of a certain color or make that thing. So if you make those kinds of elements all similar, if the jumpsuits of the Endrin riggers are red, and the cloaks of the shadow warriors are red, and the cloaks of the pistoliers are red, and right, and maybe they all have a similar insignia on it, even if it's just a simple freehand thing or a decal or whatever. It can be varied. Like I said, you can pick any of many things. Okay, just so we get the idea. But yeah, cool stuff, man. Thank you for sharing. Okay, next up, Kyle Knapp. Kyle, again, bringing us a really interesting converted force. I believe this is supposed to also be cities. And Brendan's in the chat, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe this is also supposed to be cities, obviously mainly focusing on Dispossessed. And we've got some great shots here of our bear warriors, our bear pistoliers, I suspect is what they are. That's what it looks like to my mind. Here it seems like he modeled some nice pistols. And I think when you're doing kind of conversions, having the weapons be roughly appropriate on most of the models is a good way to go. And here's some of our a mix of some of our other dwarves that are in the force. Nice mix of those female dwarves from a couple different ranges he's got mixed in here, along with his iron drakes. Let's say that's right. And Dispossessed are not my favorite, and a lot of their units sound the same. So, but I hope I got it right. And then here's his characters. So, his rune priests and that sort of thing. This is all great. I really like this force, man. This is nice. It's coherent, but there's good variation. And so, like, we can look back at this shot. You can see how we used some different sort of color tones here and there. But the basing scheme with the snow, they feel very, very kind of like they're in a cold, inhospitable, mountainous terrain, which is great. So I really like that. I like the freehand and on the banner over here. I think that's really cool. So I think we're looking at the force. What I would encourage you to do is on the figures where there's hair and beards and stuff like that exposed, which is not every one of these dwarves, because some of them are fully clad in metal. But where we have people like this, where they've got, big beards, big hair, stuff like that. So the girls here on the left side, or the beards, that kind of thing. What I would push for on that is try to be a little more varied in that. What I mean by that is you've got some. This goes back to the idea of variation and contrast. It's not just value variation, although we could use a little more of that as well. That is to say, light and dark. It can also be in simple contrast of the various colors we would see. For example, all of these we can see more back here, are just this same blonde color. Okay, I mean, sure, it could be that all of the warriors who showed up to this force from this unit are blonde. I guess that's certainly possible. But to be the exact same color of blonde, like, even when you go to countries that have sort of much less diversity and you see a lot of similar hair color, like, certain European countries and Northern European countries where people tend to have a lot of very similar hair color, it's still broadly the same. Like, yeah, there might be a lot of people who are blonde, but there's still a lot of variation in there. You have strawberry blondes and pale and platinum, and some have a little more sandy and a little more brown in there and stuff like that. So just, those kinds of elements that are varied make it much more visually compelling, because it feels more like real people who got together, right? Because if I were to randomly look at any group of people, just kind of randomly sampled, it would be very rare that I had 20 people with literally the exact same hair color, right? So, and at the same point, push your contrast on stuff like that farther, especially when it's the dominant force around the head. Bases, faces, banners, shields, right? The first four things you notice on a miniature and where you should often spend a lot of your time. Hair frames the face. Hair and beards frame the face. So you want to make sure that that area is really nice. So pushing up those highlights a little higher, pushing down those shades a little lower, and varying the colors, I think, is a good way to go there. But overall, this is a really great force. It's very cool. It's very thematic. I absolutely dig it. So well done. Well done on a great force. Okay. Mark Ramsick is next. And he brings us, we'll zoom in a little bit. That picture's kind of small. There we go. Okay, he's bringing us a Khorne force with a whole lot of bloodthirsters. So much bloodthirsting. I have to take a drink here. Okay. This is a great force. I always love to see Khorne. I love bloodthirsters and the Khorne dogs. You get a force that's bloodthirsters and dogs. You're right in my wheelhouse, right at the center of my heart, and that is exactly what we have here. We're just like slowly getting farther away. Let's go to this picture and zoom in, because this will be what I think is a great picture of the whole army. There we go. So this is really nice. I don't mind the Realm of Battle board as your display board. I would generally say you probably want to do a little more with it, like add some more different elements to it. Now, that being said, I think your major opportunity here with the army is largely to do with tonal variation. So the black is very flat, the reds are kind of flat, everything's kind of flat. And this is one of those chances where you've really got a very coherent scheme. You've got basically two forms in the army, right? So you've got your dogs and you got your bloodthirsters. So those are your two forms. So then what you want to do is really establish, okay, what are the ways that I'm going to make these two things more visually compelling, right? And like it could be fire emblems on the wings because those wings have big sort of scarification kind of built into them. You can bring out, make those look fiery and hot. You could push the musculature, witness the muscularity on the bloodthirsters themselves. What do I mean by flat? Somebody just asked. Okay, the red just looks like red. The black just looks like black. It doesn't have contrast. That's what I'm saying when I say it looks flat. The skulls on the base back here just look like white. Right? The gray just looks like gray. Everything is very flat. It's very one color. And especially with these 5 big bloodthirsters, what you would want is to see a lot more variation in things like the wings. Again, see my previous conversation about centerpiece models, right? With the dogs, even if it was like some dry brush to pick out all the texture and stuff they have on their back, and then a glazing over to smooth it into a color tone, we'd be in a lot better place, right? But popping up some of the elements on the dog's faces, taking the musculature up to orange and stuff like that, so that pops more. That I think is your big opportunity here, and where I would see this as that's the challenge with your current force. So, but it's a great force. I dig it. I would have loved to see this play on the table. This is one of my favorite types of armies, is the like all bloodthirsters and dogs. I love everything about it. So it really is one of the greatest things in the world. I admittedly loved it more when you could make Karanak your general. But sadly, he's not a leader anymore, so you can't do that. But that's okay. Karanak can still be in the force. He just can't be the boss. Lassie can't lead around the bloodthirsters anymore. All right. Next up is Nick McKenna. Nick has an absolutely beautiful, beautiful Gloomspite Gitz force. So this is really wonderful. Really, really bright and eye-catching. Fantastic display board. So we're going to, Nick gave us 4 great pictures here. This is kind of the army all in. This is the acid trip of an army. I love it. Obviously, my co-host on Warhammer Weekly, Tom, is currently working on a very similar bright force of his own. And so I think he'll draw a lot of inspiration from this. But as we go through these pictures, I really like how this force came out. So let's kind of go through. So here we've got his Skitterstrand Arachnarok, so the one without anybody mounted on top. As well, we've got his trolls back there, the Rock Gut Trolls, in this very nice color. Here we have all of our little Gobos, our little Stabas with their Nettas up front. Again, just extremely bright colors. I like how he has the little distracting eyes on the top of the pink, as though their their hoods have eyes, almost like a butterfly is what I picture he's going for there, to make the thing seem bigger than it is. The little goblins are using sneaky butterfly techniques. They too have listened to Crazy Town and they know what it's all about. This is just an early 2000s musical reference show, apparently. Over here, we've got a lot of the Spore Splata fanatics. You can see he added little pieces of silverware and stuff in there. So really great overall. Notice because I don't think, we don't have a close-up of him, but we can see him here. Notice the Mangler in the background, painted like a big, giant underwater sea creature with the spoons back here. This is really just like, this is Willy Wonka. This is an acid trip. This is absolutely, absolutely amazing. Between the conversions, the paint, and the bright colorations, it's an absolute riot. I dig it. The display board looks great too. Great pour with the water. So this is just really amazing. I don't want to really call it out. I hope everybody noticed all the little spoons that these guys are wielding. Like, look at all this. It's amazing. All the goblins with spoons. It's just nuts. So really, really wonderful job. And then of course we'll go back to the full army shot. And then of course the moon sitting right up front there. So really, really great stuff. Overall, I think where you've got some opportunities, Nick, is just in some of the blending and stuff like that. Some of your transitions in the army are a little harsh. There, we don't. Some of it's meant to be because some of it is patterning. So I'm not calling that stuff out. Like the lines on the Mangler are meant to be harsh lines because they're meant to be a patterning. So I don't have any issue with that. I think that, but in some places we've got some blending that I think we could smooth out and stuff like that. But overall, this force is really quite impressive. There's a lot of little elements to love in here. Just witness like the basing on the rock gut trolls, where he's worked in all the mushrooms and put a lot of different color around them. They have green around the base, and they're wonderfully detailed. The basing on the skitter strand is it's just absolutely incredible. On the display board, when we're using all of this stuff, by the way, I would say the same thing I said before, which is just careful of unpainted elements, even on things like your display board, especially on model bases. A good trick here, if you don't want to actually paint them and you want to get a wash to stick, is just spray them down with a coat of varnish, like Tester's Dull Coat if you don't have an airbrush, or any kind of varnish out of your airbrush if you do have an airbrush. And then just, again, run a wash over them or something. Maybe dry brush the edges a little bit with like something. Just getting a little bit of actual acrylic paint on there will make them feel much more harmonious with the rest of the models, because it's very noticeable to us when we have things that are painted in acrylic paint next to things that aren't. You can very much tell the difference usually, right? So that's what I would say. But this is an absolutely just this one's a great force. From execution to display to the painting to the vision, this is wonderful. The conversions, every part of this is absolutely fantastic. So, Nick, just wonderful, wonderful work. Okay, next up, Paul Wagner, and Paul brings us a little more simple concept army on the Gloomspite. So he's still kind of in the middle of it, obviously, but he was going more for a simple sort of monochromatic scheme here. So one of the things I would say to you, Paul, if you wanted to go for more of this concept thing with just kind of quick 2 colors sort of idea, with kind of the yellow and the purple. And I don't know where you planned to go from here, but I'd be interested to see where you were going to go. But one thing I will say, if anywhere, one thing I will say with elements like this, Paul, is definitely make your bases, the rim of your bases, black. Like if you're going to go for a simple concept army that's more monochromatic or a few colors, make sure that your base rim is black. It'll actually help sell the overall effect of the monochromatic or limited palette scheme a lot better, because it will make them feel like they're part of that world on its own and they're separated from everything else. When the rim of the base is that color, that the whole rest of the model is, it now feels like the model is made of the base. Okay? So that's like, in other words, when this color is the same as this color, it feels like the model and the base are made of the same thing, is what's happened. Now, if this were rimmed black, it would look like the model is something different. It's sitting in its own world, and it is its own thing. So, conceptually, I think it's cool. It looks almost like you were going for like a everybody by firelight scheme. But I would say that you definitely want to then separate that element out. If you're going to do this and you were going to refine it, I would also go in and, make sure you have the individual details shaded and highlighted appropriately, where individual elements are really getting picked out and being able to show that transition. But cool stuff. Always great to see, Paul. This is a nice expansion for the incredible army of spiders you already have. Okay, so now we've got Steve Tasek. There are 3 PTACEKs in here. I'm going to say Tasek. So we got a whole family of the hardest to pronounce name I could possibly have. But I apologize to this family if I am getting that name wrong at all. I don't know if it's like husband, wife, child, or brother, sister, or whatever. Whatever the situation is, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. So here we have the Seraph force. So again, we've got some stuff in mid painting, so that's okay. We'll evaluate the stuff that's painted. And I will say most of the stuff is coming along very nice. We'll look up here. I like the blue on the Sauruses, very classic scheme. The ones over on the left with a little bit more going on in the base, those are the ones I really like that. I'd be curious as to why those are a different base than the rest. Because you have sort of a dry base. Oh, okay, got it. Oh, Brendan, it's the Partners at War people. I didn't know that was their names. Okay, got it. Awesome. Yeah, I know Partners at War. All right. I did not realize that was their last name. Okay. So I would love to know what the reason was for the difference in the basing scheme. So, but that's fine. But I like the colors. I'll tell you, my favorite piece in this army is actually the Bastillodon hanging out back there with Mr. Purple and Blue and the big green gem. I love that. That looks great. Those are great pop colors. That blue and lilac and green are a great triadic color scheme. I think that that works really well. So I think that's a great success. What I would honestly love to see is a little more of that lilac and green worked into the rest of the force. I think you hit it right there. That's really strong, and I'd love to see that integrated into a lot of the other elements, because I think that the lilac and the green make the blue stand out a little more, and I think that that's a really nice eye catching idea there. Obviously, your opportunities beyond just finishing up the rest of the models are integrate some more colors. Again, maybe push some of the elements up a little more, some more tonal variation, and definitely add some more spice to the bases. Okay, next up is Tracy Tasic, also from Partners at War. I apologize, Partners at War folks. They make great bat reps. You should absolutely check out the Partners at War channel. This is a nice Flesheater Quartz army, and I really like this one a lot. So really nice green color mixed with a bit of flesh tone to create something quite striking. I don't see a lot of the, here we go, let's zoom out to the broader forest here. I don't see a lot of the Flesheater Quartz in this exact color of green. A lot of people go for a more fleshy tone. This is a little more rotten, and I like that quite a bit. So I think that came out really well. I think your main opportunities here, your big flappies look nice, but your main opportunities are largely in, again, more variation, more contrast on the force. I think the ghouls could maybe use just a few slight touch-ups. I don't see much of an issue there. Where I really see the opportunity is in the bigger models, like the Vargeists and your big flappies. Because they've got these big, gorgeous wings and these massive bone protrusions coming out everywhere. And yet it's rather flat, right? The wings are rather monotone. The bone is rather monotone. So again, varying those kinds of elements, especially on the larger models, the centerpiece models, I think would go a long way toward really grabbing my attention and making sure that those centerpiece models have the get the love and care that they deserve, right? Because they are such absolutely gorgeous, beautiful sculpts. And as far as your base composition, again, it's another example, just not to keep banging this drum, but that is a good execution here. Not all of the Vargeists have the same color wings, which is great. I can see different units. It all is within the same broad color scheme for the army, right? But like Terrorgeist and the Vargeists over on these two, these two right here, whatever. This one and this one, they have this sort of nice green tone, and then you've got purple and purple here, and then we've got the red ones to match up, down here. So yeah, I like that. And again, I would look at adding a little more to the base. Avoid just kind of grit. Like, these guys are cool cannibals. Bones, blood, gore, viscera, skulls, discarded items, shields, broken weapons. All sorts of stuff that cannibals would be into. All over the bases. Okay. Let's see. Next up, Vince. There's 4 people. The whole family's coming. That's awesome. Yes, it says husband, wife, and both their kids. So that's fantastic. I love that. That is absolutely so wonderful. So here we've got a Stormcast army, and I am obviously biased to this one since this is Vince, and I'm Vince, so well done, Vince. Uh, but no, great Stormcast force here. We can see lots of different, obviously in um, our traditional color scheme for the Hammers of Sigmar with gold and blue. Very, very nice traditional force with the Relictor and the Castellant up front. But then we also have a couple of the newer pieces in there as well, such as the Ordinator and so on and so forth. I think some of my favorite parts of this army are your little birdies, your Aether Wings back there. Those look really nice. I think the execution on the Stormcast themselves is nice. Again, I would say your opportunity here is largely in variation, especially on the gold. Looking into how to shade that gold more, highlight that gold more, really pop it up so it doesn't feel as samey. But especially also with the blue, we've got a lot of very flat blue. Bringing that up to another couple levels will really make it stand out. Same again with the bases, okay? But it's a great force overall. Certainly seems like it would have been super fun to play, and I do love this very classic color scheme, so well done. All right, and our last army, Zach Chetta. I think I'm saying that right. Chetta? I don't know. Probably Chetta. With some bone splitters. So we can see we've got all sorts of different prophets, and we've got our big old idol of Gork and or possibly Mork back there. We've got our big Stabbas, and just lots of wonderful Savage Orcs in here. We'll stay on this shot since this is a nice kind of all-encompassing shot of the various models we've got. We can see the big Stabbas over on the right and all our Savages. So I think I like this. I like the icy scheme because this actually fits very well to obviously one of the Bone Splitter tribes. So this is a really nice alignment. It immediately jumps out at me as you've gone for that tribe. So that reads really well. Between I like the ice weapons tying into the ice bases. I think that's a good touch. You got some snow in there, all that kind of stuff. So that all of that sells to me. Sorry, had a little bug. All that sells to me. I think that looks good. I think your biggest opportunity is in cleanup. Some of the orcs look like they were kind of washed and then we just sort of stopped. Like I can see pooling and stuff like that where the skin isn't quite as smooth as I would want it to be. When it comes to Bone Splitters, it's a skin game. It's all about that sweet, sweet orc skin, right? So you want to make sure you do the work of cleaning up that skin, highlighting the faces, maybe adding a little bit of pink tone here or there if you're feeling like you really want to go the extra mile. But making sure that musculature is well defined and smooth, I think, is something that that is worth putting in the time on an army like this because it will really help. It will really help sell that overall effect. There you go. Okay. So that's it. That's the last force. Great armies. Obviously, there was a lot more than that, but these were the folks who submitted to be reviewed. So thank you, everyone who submitted. It's always sort of brave. It's an act of bravery to just randomly put your army up for somebody to talk about it on the internet. This one was specifically, so Nigel just asked a question. How can you submit your army for review? This was specifically for Brew City, and so the people who were attending that tournament, which was run by Brendan Melnick, Brendan reached out to me and asked if I wouldn't mind doing this since obviously the tournament was canceled. I am, Nigel, going to be organizing a tied to an event army review like this at some point in the future. Just watch this space. You'll see me talk about it on the show. I'll announce it well in advance so that people have lots of time to finish up their army, push for it. I want to give everybody a couple months to sort of finish their army, know it's coming, and then we'll have a submission time, and then we'll do the review show after that. I need to think about how I want to structure all that, what pictures I need, sort of requirements, stuff like that. But we will eventually do that show. So you didn't miss anything yet, Nigel. This was for a specific event. But you have not missed your window. We will do this again going forward. So the last and most important thing we can do is talk about who I think overall had our strongest forces, who's our winner for coolest army and our runner up. So this comes down to two different forces. I'll start with the runner up over here. So my second place army is without a doubt going to go over here to Chris Grafton. Excellently painted. Good conversions. We still had some opportunities for improvement, certainly, but a really nice force that has a very clear narrative and theme and a strong execution. So overall, this is great. So Chris will get your info so that Anthony can get you a piece of terrain as our runner-up. And our first place winner has to go absolutely over here to... sorry, this was... There you go, to Nick. I had to find his name. To Nick McKenna. Nick, this is an absolute wonderful, wonderful force. This was the vision of this, the execution of this, the size of this, the conversions of this. Everything here was absolutely so strong. This is just absolutely mind-boggling in its insanity and its vision, and yet somehow you made this riot of acid trip colors work so well. I just loved it. So really great job on this army. Very, very well done. This was a lot of great forces there. I liked a lot of what I saw. Other people, there was a lot of great forces in here, certainly. In the end, I had to pick two, and those were the two that I thought were just sort of above the rest. But as always, my own evaluation is my evaluation alone. I hope what this does is inspires all of you watching, maybe with some ideas for your own force, gives you some ideas inspires you to get your army done in this time where we're all kind of stuck in our house, and gives you maybe some cool ideas for what you could do for your own force, whether it's dwarven pistoliers riding bears, or psychedelic goblins with spoons, or just all the bloodthirsters. Whatever it is, there's so much here to be inspired by. So absolutely wonderful work. Thank you to everybody who submitted. Thank you to everybody who's watching, both now and in the future. Shout out to Brendan for organizing this. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to review everything. I'm always honored and humbled to be able to review people's armies. People who put in so many hours of their lives to getting a full army done. It is a fantastic accomplishment and something that you should always be proud of. So everybody here should be 100% proud that they got their army together and painted. And I look forward to seeing Brew City coming back strong in 2021 when we're all on the other side of this current situation we're in. As I said, Brendan's Twitter will be linked down below in the comments. If you're watching this, if you enjoyed this army review, please do give it a like. That helps other people find the channel and find this, and hopefully will help other people find some inspiration of their own. So, as always, I thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you found this fun. As I said, we will do this again in the future. We'll do this as a non-event type thing where people can submit their armies. Come back tomorrow, by the by, everybody watching now. We're going to do our monthly hobby cheating Q&A tomorrow, so I'll be back on the stream tomorrow afternoon, and we'll talk then about your hobby questions. But for now, thank you for watching. Hit that like button, and as always, we'll see you next time.